The following program is video supplemental instruction. VSI is brought to you by the Teaching Center, UF's Learning Support Center, www.teachingcenter.ufl.edu.
Hi, this is the second video in our Lsat series. In this video we're going to go over the introduction to the Lsat, so we're going to talk a little bit about the organization of the test itself, as well as go over some of the tips that are going to help you prepare for the test. So first thing you want to know about the Lsat is that there are three unique sections. There's the logic game, the reading comprehension, and the arguments, and there's a total of 5 sections on the test, a mix of either of those 3. So the logic game section is the most mathematical of all the sections. You're going to be making a lot of deductive reasoning. You're going to be drawing charts. You're going to be breaking things down logically. So that section it has less actual reading than the other sections, and is more mathematics based. The reading comprehension section is just like any of the other reading comprehensions that you face throughout your academic career, and on the LSAT, on the SAT, on the FCAT. You're basically given a reading passage and you have to answer certain questions about the reading passage. So you're going to be asked what the main point of the author was, what the author would most likely agree with, the line on such and such is most closely related to such and such, or serves what purpose. So you faced exams like this before, and so you're probably most familiar with that section. The third section is the arguments, or the analytical reasoning section, and this section is set up in short snippets, short paragraphs of arguments, or sometimes they'll have a dialogue between two people, but it's always going to be some sort of argument with some sort of conclusion, either explicitly stated or implied. And you're going to have to answer questions either about the content, the substance of the actual argument, or the structure and organization of it. So you might be asked, what is the conclusion? What is the premise? Or you might be asked, what most weakens the conclusion? Or what most weakens the argument? Or you can imply from the argument that, such and such. So we're going to go more into that in subsequent videos. We're going to talk about the individual sections and how to attack them. But for right now, we just want to make sure you guys know the organization and structure of the test. So you're going to have 5 sections composed of those three different unique variant sections. You're going to have 1 graded logic game section, 1 graded reading comprehension section, 2 graded argument sections, and 1 experimental section that isn't graded, but you're not going to know which one it is. This is basically the section where you're a lab rat for the LSAT. They use it to collect data, to make tests in the future, things like that. But you do know that there's definitely going to be 1 logic game, 1 reading game, 1 logic game, 1 reading comp, and 2 arguments. So you can deduce, for instance, if there's 2 logic games, you're going to know that your 1 reading comp and your 2 arguments are definitely graded. But you're not going to know which one of the logic games are. So you have to treat them all like they're going to be graded, because you're not going to know which one's not. There's also a 6th section, which is the essay, but it's the least important, really. Most law schools, from what I hear, don't even look at them. You still want to do it, and you still want to take it semi-serious. You don't want to just, blow it off on the off chance that one of the law schools actually looks at it. But you want to make sure that you don't spend too much of your preparation time, practice time, preparing for the essay. Because, if you're a prospective law school student, you probably have written plenty throughout your academic career, so you're probably used to writing. And on top of that, they're probably not going to look at it, so you don't want to spend too much time on it, preparing on it anyways. The test is set up so that each section is 35 minutes long. You can only work on any given section at a time, so you can't go back and forth. You can only work on that one section that's being administered at that 35-minute interval. And the way it's set up is you have 3 consecutive sections of 35 minutes. So you have section 1 for 35, then you jump right into section 2 for 35 minutes, then you jump right into section 3 for 35 minutes. Then you have a 15-minute break between sections 3 and 4, and then you have, again, you have section 4 for 35 minutes, section 5 for 35 minutes, and then you have the essay for 35 minutes. So the test is, can be a little, it can be a little intense. As far as the timing goes, you don't have too many breaks. The way the scoring is set up is it's on a scale from 120 to 180. It's curved, so it's curved based on the amount on your peers that took the test at that administration of the test. I'm not entirely sure of the exact breakdown of the whole scale. That's available online. You can look at the percentiles. I know the 170, for instance, is like the 97th percentile. So it does follow a certain bell curve. So it's not like, you know, a graded scale on that you're used to for GPA, for instance, where a 90 and an 80 are just as far away from the 100 as each, you know, the 90 is exactly 10 away from the 100, and the 80 is exactly 20 away from the 100. It's more curved. So again, for the percentile breakdowns, you're going to have to look at that online as well as what the schools are looking for. So that's the breakdown of the test. We'll go more into detail on the sections in subsequent videos. Now we're going to talk a little bit about general tips and hints to help you prepare for the test. The biggest advice I can give is to read a lot. Just read. Especially if you're a sophomore or a freshman, you have a huge advantage of time. If you know you might get into law school, or might get, you know, your prospective law school student, don't waste your freshman and sophomore year. You don't have to start taking the Lsat practice test yet. You don't have to start getting too intense about looking at schools yet. But you can get a huge advantage by just reading a lot, just developing those skills. Because if you can see, as you can see, the logic game section is the only one that doesn't involve too much reading, intense reading. The reading comprehension and the 2 argument section, which is 3 out of the 4 graded sections, involve reading, involve analyzing the arguments or the reading passages. So you're going to have to develop those skills, and these aren't the type of skills that you can just work on in a month and improve drastically. The logic game sections are more amenable to that. Since they're more mathematic, you can learn certain formulas, certain tricks that'll help you improve your score a lot in that section. But there are tricks and strategies for the other sections, but generally the best advice I can give is to develop those reading skills throughout your college career. And this is not to discourage this is not to discourage juniors and seniors. You can still develop those skills. You can still improve those skills by reading a lot, but it's more to push the sophomores and freshmen to not waste that time and to take advantage of the advantage they have, which is time. Just reading journals, academic journals. The academic journals are a great place to develop those skills, because every entry you read is basically a whole argument. It's some academic somewhere trying to prove their point about something. So whether you agree with it or not is not important. It's the fact that you have to be able to read a document, understand what you're reading, understand the structure of the argument, where they're going with it, why they're going there, and so you can develop those skills. Newspapers, preferably higher level writing. Newspapers with higher level writing, such as the New York Times, newspapers like that. You don't want to be reading tabloids. It's not going to help you out too much. Course reading is a big it's really understated, because let's face it, a lot of times in your courses, you're going to read a lot, and you're going to feel like, why am I even reading all this when the teacher's not covering most of it or all of it, and some of it is not on the test. So I'm a senior now, so I've taken a bunch of courses where students can get a feel for what their teachers cover and what they don't. and they'll tend to maybe skim through stuff that is maybe only going to be discussed but not necessarily covered on a test. But I would advise students to read everything, cover to cover. Everything that's assigned, read it, because what's important here isn't the grade you're going to get on your course. I mean, that grade is important. It's important for your GPA. It's important for your personal academic credentials. But what we're trying to build here, as far as regards to the LSAT and law school, are skills that you're going to need. Skills that are going to help you out with the reading, comp, and argument section, and skills that are going to help you out in law school. You're not going to be able to cut corners in law school, especially if you go to a good law school and just, skim through stuff. You're going to have to read everything. So the more you read, the more you push yourself to read, the more you're going to develop those skills that are really important for both the LSAT and law school. So this flows right into the next section, which is courses. You don't want to just slide through college, taking the easy courses, taking the easy electives. You want to challenge yourself. I mean, you only get one chance at whatever degree you're working on, and you're paying money for it, whether it's a good class or an easy class. So you want to take advantage of that. You want to take advantage of the money you're paying. You want to take advantage of the opportunity you have to be taught and to learn. So you want to challenge yourself with the hard courses, the courses that make you read a lot and write a lot, the courses that make you analyze a lot. If you hear horror stories about a teacher, and I'm not talking about the teachers that are generally and actually bad teachers. If you hear that a teacher is just a bad teacher, they can't teach, or they don't something that has to do with the actual teaching of stuff or the way they treat people, things like that, that's something different. I'm talking about usually hear teachers that are bad teachers because they assign a lot of work. That, to me, that's not being a bad teacher. To me, a teacher that assigns a lot of work is a good teacher because they're usually going to cover a lot of work. There's usually a teacher that wants to teach you a lot and a teacher that wants to push you a lot. And those are the best teachers. You want to search for the teachers that push their students and that are constantly trying to get the best out of their students. So, and again, the important thing here is skills. If you push yourself to your breaking point, you're going to better yourself for it. You're going to be better for it. So you don't want to just take the easy electives so that you can have an easy ride through college. You want to push yourself, at least if you want to get a good LSAT score and you want to get into a good law school. And I mean, that also helps you once you get into law school. If you're already taking tough courses, you're going to be a lot less intimidated by the course load and the workload of law school. So another thing you want to make sure that you do is familiarize yourself with the test. This comes into play a little closer, not so much when you're a freshman or sophomore. If you're a junior, by maybe your spring junior semester, you want to start taking a look at the test. If you're a senior, definitely already want to start taking a look at the test. And the point is to familiarize yourself with the test. You don't want to be caught off guard. The best advice I can give anybody for the LSAT is to just take a bunch of tests. Just take tests, because you want to develop a good strategy for it. You want to familiarize yourself for it. You don't want to be surprised by anything come the day for the test. So you want to practice as many tests as you can. And the best practice are the actual LSAT tests. LSAT offers their old tests. The bad things, you have to buy them, but with once you sign up for the LSAT, they offer you one free test, but you're going to need a lot more than that. You also, another reason for taking so many tests is to figure out your strengths and weaknesses. With the LSAT, obviously there's several different sections, and every question is worth the same amount of points. So you want to make sure that you're good on all the sections, because if you're really good on one section and you bomb another one, you're not going to get a good score. So you want to make sure you figure out what your weaknesses are so you can work on them. You don't want to neglect your strengths, your strong sections, but you still want to spend a little bit more time on your weaknesses so that you can bring up that section. And the third reason for taking so many tests is so that your clock can become your frenemy. Everybody's going to tell you that your clock is your enemy on the Lsat, and I would be really inclined to agree with them. But I've figured out that your clock can be your frenemy. You can come to terms with the clock, and you guys can come to an understanding and a compromise. At the beginning, the clock is definitely going to be your enemy. There's no question about it. You're going to have sections that are more difficult than others, and it's going to be impossible for you to finish it within the 35 minutes. You're going to feel like, who do these people think they are giving me 35 minutes to do this? It's impossible. But that's the point. They want to make sure that only the best can get the best score, because anybody could finish the whole test if it was an unlimited amount of time. But you want to make sure that at the beginning you're not getting too frustrated. I mean, I wanted to kill the clock at the beginning. I was always good with the reading comp and the argument session, but the logic games would always give me trouble. I could never finish it in time, and I was left with, a whole game unfinished. You usually get 4 games per logic game section, and I would have a whole incomplete game, and that just kills your score. So I would hate the clock. I would detest it. I would want to shoot it, but over time you start pacing yourself, and this is something you want to do a little more later on down the road. You want to first take the test and start taking it without worrying about the clock, so that you can get the concepts down and learn how to actually answer the questions. And then later on, you want to start pacing yourself. And the thing is, once you start pacing yourself, and after you get over the whole, once you get over the hump of doing it within the allotted time, and you and the clock can come to that, more of that agreement where you actually finish within the 35 minutes, the clock can become your friend. I mean, your frenemy, because it's always going to be your enemy. You always want to beat the clock. But what I mean by frenemy is basically this. I got to a point where I would finish every section with about 3 to 5 minutes to spare. And what that allowed me to do was, for one thing, you go back and go over some of the questions you might have had you might have been more unsure about. But more importantly for me anyways, I would go back and maybe answer 1 or 2, or look over 1 or 2 that I maybe starred next to. But I try not even to do that too much, because for one thing, second guessing yourself is usually not a good thing. But you want to use that time to give yourself a mental break. The LSAT is a mental marathon. After taking a test, especially after your first couple tests, you're gonna feel like you've been on an all-night binge, and you're gonna feel like your brain has just gone through, a marathon. You're gonna feel just really mentally fatigued. And if you can use the clock to your advantage and use those couple extra minutes you have at the end of each section, if you finish with time to spare, to just put your head back, close your eyes, take deep breaths, and relax, that little rest will help you out in your next section. Because the worst thing that you can have happen is, finish the section, maybe not finish and you have to guess on the last 2, or finish just on time, or even finish but then you're going over the whole thing again. All of a sudden the next section starts, because the sections start one after the other. I mean, the proctor will tell you, put your pencils down. She'll restart the clock, and she'll start, okay, open up the next section, and it's literally like a couple seconds, and that's it. You're thrown into the next section, and you have to just switch your way of thinking, because if it's a different type of section, it's just a different type of thinking, and it's like throwing a wrench in everything. So you want to give yourself time to relax, come out of the last section, give yourself a little 2 minutes of relaxation time, go to the Bahamas, go to South America, I don't know, go wherever you want to go, Siberia, wherever, in your mind, and just relax. And the next section starts, and your mind is a little bit more clear, less cluttered. And a couple other tips that I have is, one is the prep course. Prep courses are expensive. I took a prep course. It was $1,300, and that was the cheapest one they had, and it was like 6 weeks long. It was a total of 8 actual classes that we met, plus 3 practice tests, and the classes were about 3 hours each. It helped me. I can't say that it didn't help me, but the reason I had to take it was because I procrastinated, and this is not something you want to do. If you can start off early, start off as a freshman or sophomore reading a lot, in your junior year, a year and a half before the test, start looking at the tests, taking a bunch of practice tests, figuring out your weaknesses, looking at resources that are available online, even here, that can give you the tips for the actual test taking itself, strategies for the different sections. You can beat the test without having to take a prep course. But if you do procrastinate, the prep course might be an easy way out. Might be an easier way out. They usually help at least a couple points. I mean, from my experience, it did help. I started my first diagnostic test I took at the prep course. I had a 158, which isn't bad necessarily, but it isn't great. It's it's up there. It's like I think the 80 percentile around there, something like that. Maybe upper 70s. I'm not too sure, but it wasn't as much as I wanted, and I felt like my test was literally a month and a half after that first diagnostic. I felt like there was no way I can get it up to what I wanted, and sure enough, throughout the course of the prep course, I got it up to 167 was the highest I got on the prep course, so that was about a 9-point increase, which is pretty good. And then I took the test this past June and I got a 170. So the prep course definitely helped, but it's expensive. It's something you have to figure out on your own, whether you have enough time to study without a prep course, whether you have the money to do it if you didn't have enough time. So it's something you have to kind of figure out your own personal situation and make a personal decision. But I would tell you that it's not absolutely necessary to take a prep course. I learned stuff through the prep course, don't get me wrong, but to be honest, most of my help came from just taking a bunch of tests, from just doing a bunch of practice. That's where most of my improvement came in. I could tell. They definitely gave me advice that helped out, but I don't think it was worth $1,300. That's just my opinion. Sleep is very important. Not just getting sleep. I mean, you want your 8 hours of sleep, absolutely. But what I mean by sleep is sleep pattern, because you want to make sure that you're taking the test at your peak mental, when your mind is at its peak. In other words, if you're a morning person and you perform really well right after you wake up, a couple hours after you wake up, then make sure you wake up, make sure your sleep pattern is set up so that you can wake up a couple hours before your test. If you're an afternoon person, you work better after 5 or 6 hours have elapsed, or 4 or 5 hours, then make sure you wake up so that amount of time passes before the test is. Basically, this is something you have to figure out personally, but I always work well earlier on in the day. I like to, maybe 2 hours after I wake up is when I'm most, into it or aware. And I figured this out because when I was taking the practice test, I would wake up at 8:30, 9 in the morning, take the practice test at 1, and I was already fatigued after the second section. So then somebody gave me this advice, and I started going to sleep later, waking up later. I would wake up at like 10 or 11. So it was only like 2.5 hours before the test, and I was so much more into it. But I was, by the time the 15-minute break came after the third section, I was still fresh, and I just felt the difference. So it can be a big help to you. And anxiety is the last thing I want to talk about. Anxiety can really hurt you a lot. Some people get test anxiety, some people don't. I saw so many people the day of the test just so nervous about the test that they were just freaking out about it. And I usually don't get test anxiety, and it started freaking me out. I just zoned them out because it kind of rubbed off. They're talking about, oh, what if I get a bad score of this, or what if this means so much, and this test is... Look, it's an important test. It definitely is, and I'm not saying it's not. But because it's an important test, you want to make sure you're relaxed. It's not... first of all, you can take more than one test. You might not want to do that. You definitely want to get as good a score as you can at the beginning. Another thing is you can cancel your score. there's a certain amount of time that the LSAT gives you to cancel your score. So for whatever reason you felt like the test score doesn't reflect what you should get, or you took a bad test that day, you can cancel it. I was really sick when I took my test, and I was thinking about canceling it, and it was an option I had, and that made me feel a lot better going into the test. And another thing is just getting test anxiety is only going to hurt you. It's not going to help you. Another thing is that practice helps with this, because if you practice a lot, if you familiarize yourself with the test, by the time you go to take it, it's going to be just like another practice test. You're not gonna be freaked out about it. It's not going to be something that you're not used to. You're going to be very familiar with it. So it's going to be more routine. You're going to be working off more of like a muscle memory type reaction, instead of something that's new and unexpected. So this is pretty much it for the intro to the LSAT. Be sure to check out our other videos where we're going to go over more in depth in the different sections. We're going to go over how they're set up, how best to attack them, the strategies. We're going to do we're going to do some examples so that you guys can see. If you have any question, email us at lsat180uf@gmail.com, and hopefully this all helps you get your ideal LSAT score and get into your ideal college, law school.
The Teaching Center, UF's Learning Support Center, www.teachingcenter.ufl.edu.